Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the very first Fedora Friday. I hope you guys are having a happy Fedora Friday. Uh, wow. Um, it feels like I've been away for forever, to be honest. Um, you know, uh, yeah, it just, the last episode was the inaugural episode of our Hat Tuesday series. Hopefully, you guys enjoyed that. I know I did. Ultimately, I started off that episode thinking I was just going to talk about my Knox custom fedora, but I ended up getting Brian Forbes of Brian Forbes Hat on the live stream. So I was just tickled. You know, Brian had called me literally a few minutes before that live stream started, and I was able to share the link with him and got him to come on here and tell a little bit of his hat journey and his story. And then ultimately, I got Paul on there, and Paul jumped in and had a lot of good questions and input. And I was just really enjoying the interaction between myself, Brian, and Paul. That three-way interaction, because it really was the major point of why I created this channel to begin with. It wasn't to kind of show my hat collection. I know I keep saying that, but it's true. That basically is just a straw man, really, to get a conversation going and amongst hat nerds, seasoned and budding alike. And ultimately, that's kind of where I want to continue taking this. I already got a hold of a couple more hatters. Hey, how you doing, Paul? Good afternoon. Yeah, I was just talking about our inaugural Hat Tuesday episode, and how that kind of shifted from what I had initially thought was going to happen. I had no idea that I was going to be able to get yourself as well as Brian Forbes on there at that time. It was one of those happy accidents. And I don't know about you, Paul, but I had a great time doing that. It really was. All good. I can jump on if you like. Of course you can, Paul. Absolutely. Like I said, I think that's going to be a really fruitful for our audience. If it's not just me bloviating by myself, having a discussion about the topic of today is really going to be helpful. Yes, that session was great with Brian. Yeah, wasn't it? He has such a great personality. He is just one of those guys that, besides you, Paul, can also tell that he's in it. He's got that passion. He probably always had passion, right? It's like he has one of those personalities that you're like, okay, that guy was always passionate, but when he got into hats, he just found a direction, right? He knew, right? So you could hear him talk about like his, about his love of reggae music. And then he goes into the hats and comes in with like that same passion. So it goes to show you, like, the hats, you might start off as just a passionate person in general about whatever you're passionate about. And then you get into hatting, and all of a sudden now you have that passion for hats, which is basically Paul's YouTube channel. Really, really good. I'm actually going to make sure I get Paul's Paul's information scrolling here. Paul said he's going to jump on. Paul, let me know if you're having trouble with that link, and I'll resend it to you. Again, I might have just sent you the wrong link. It's happened before. It might happen again. But we'll wait on Paul here, and I'll make sure that I'm paying attention in case Paul messages me. But yeah, the topic of the day is going to be The Godfather. I'm really psyched about this. It really is an iconic movie. But I'll just give it a little second for Paul to jump in here. Maybe Paul can give us an update on where he's at in terms of just life, hats, or anything in between. Because it's been a little bit, right? We last spoke to Paul on Tuesday during our inaugural Hat Tuesday episode, and we want to find out. It's like, I think that's part of the check-in process here with all of us, is that giving a little bit of time to kind of gather some new hat experiences, maybe some new life experiences, and a lot of things can change from a Tuesday to a Friday. So I want to make sure that we celebrate that stuff and we keep that that spirit alive here, right? Again, we're just trying to create an online version or a YouTube version of Cheers, right? Where everybody knows your name and they're always glad you came. So yeah, it's been one thing about today is that I haven't been able to go on my walks. I just had some business. I was busy right from the very moment I started. I got some coffee in me, got some work done. So yeah. All right, let me get Paul in here. Hey, Paul, how's it going?
Oh, good, thank you. You?
Excellent. Excellent. Yeah, I was basically just talking about making sure before we got into any particulars that, in case you had any updates for our audience.
I've just been looking at my hat stock and thought, well, as it's the Godfather today, I'd bring out a homburg, and I know you like not Scots of England, so yeah, we'll talk about that when the time's right. And then I'm just putting together some more of my hat linings at the moment, and I thought, well, okay, maybe that's of interest to somebody. I can show what, or at least talk through what I do. So, but no, look, it's Friday afternoon. We're shooting the breeze. It's nice to sort of come on and just talk. So, let you lead the way.
All right, that sounds great. That sounds great. Well, like I said, Paul, I'm still jazzed about Tuesday. I don't know if it comes across. I didn't get a chance to go on my walk. I just mentioned that before you jumped on. I didn't get a chance to go on my walk today because I had work to do essentially right from the moment I got up. So the moment I got up, I put the coffee pot on, and then I got right to my traditional 9-to-5 job just to get some deliverables taken care of. But the nice thing is that I rewatched The Godfather twice this week, which is no easy feat, right? I mean, it's 2.5 hours more or less, I believe. But it's one of those movies. It goes to show you how easy it is to watch those movies over again. That repeat value. So I definitely want to go and get that conversation going. Because again, I feel like we could do several episodes on this movie and maybe still not touch everything. But let's just start off right from the beginning, right? So we know about the opening scene. The opening scene is the Godfather essentially taking a request on the day of his daughter's wedding. This is by a gentleman called Bonacera, which again, I think Bonacera means hello or good day. My Italian's a little soft, but I believe Bonacera, the actual name, means like good day or hello. So obviously very serious discussion that's happening right off the bat, and you're kind of focused right on Bonacera pleading his case, and very passionate about talking about what happened to his daughter and demanding justice. So right away you can see the Godfather reply, and he's wearing his tux. And then obviously everybody knows he has the little cat in his lap, and he's having this back and forth discussion. And right away you kind of say, okay, this guy's a big deal, right? He doesn't have a hat on, right? So that is kind of like one of the key things, right? Even though we know this is an iconic hat movie, we don't get a hat probably until several minutes into this movie. And I know that sounds like nothing, Luke, but you kind of expect. Like you almost think, okay, that Godfather is going to be wearing a homburg or some kind of serious hat right in the opening scene, but he doesn't. And I feel like that's on purpose. Now, again, I don't proclaim to know a lot of the insider knowledge, right? I have some insider knowledge because there was a TV show. I think it was a 5-part TV series that was done in, I don't know, sometime in the last few years that kind of went into the inside in the making of the Godfather. But one of the things that one can speculate, right, about hats. Hey, how's it going? How's it going, Crispy? Hey, welcome. We're talking about The Godfather today. So I just wanted to kind of talk about that movie. The whole point of the movie today is to talk about that. So, Chris, I believe this is the first time you found your way into one of my live streams. But at least on my non-Mets channels. So welcome to Chris. So we want to start off with that why we don't see a hat. And Paul, you feel free to chime in here anytime. But one of my personal reasoning is The Godfather, at this point, he's at the peak of his powers, right? He's somebody, right? We talk about the fact that some people will don a hat to kind of signify and signal that they are very powerful. Maybe, just maybe, Mario Puzo and Francis Ford Coppola, right? Mario Puzo wrote the screenplay. Ford Coppola essentially helped Mario Puzo translate that screenplay, or translate that book into a verifiable screenplay that could work on screen, and then obviously directed the movie. But I feel like the lack of a hat on The Godfather is a signal that this man doesn't need a hat. He's that powerful that a hat would only take away from his mystique at this point. Like he doesn't need it. Paul, what do you think? I mean, do you have any thoughts on that?
I think it's a very interesting use of fashion and hats, and making a statement. And I think it's in the UK. It is very much if you wear a hat, if it's a baseball cap or a beanie hat or something else, it's functional, it's fashion led, and it's youngsters. But when you start getting into formal hats like a trilby, a fedora, a homburg, a top hat, a bowler, you really are making a statement that's out of the ordinary. And I know back in the time of when the Godfather was staged, most people wore hats a lot of the time. Now, whether or not they wore them inside, usually they wouldn't. But I mean, if it was in his own home, which I know was a huge mansion, if I'm thinking the right one in New York there, and it was his place of business, so to speak, where he'd call all of his concierge and so on, wherever they were, to the table, then maybe on occasions he would. But as you say, he didn't. I think the other thing though is the use of a cat. Is that cats are obviously synonymous with cat fur line, tigers, lions, and quite powerful creatures, and as well as being soft and loving and all the rest of the things that we know. But I think that's also a statement, because in having a cat, especially on your lap, and actually caressing the cat, you're calming yourself down. You're calming the cat down, and it's interesting because they use the same sort of thing on the Bond movie with the guy in that. So just an interesting use of props, really.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. One thing, again, I'm gonna go into like the whole speculation here, because I heard this rumor and it might have been tackled in the show, but my understanding is that cat was actually a cat that was in the studio, was not planned, right? And just happened to, like, Marlon Brando took a liking to the cat and essentially if you look at that cat, it looked like it was a studio cat. Like the cat was behaving and like as if it was Marlon Brando's cat, right? And now again, if somebody that might know more about like the insider view can either confirm or deny that rumor that cat, it was indeed just a cat that was around. I mean, can you imagine? It was so iconic, and if it just happened to be happenstance, one, that tells me a lot about Marlon Brando, the kind of the artist, that he had the presence of mind. It's like, you know what, this cat, I can use this cat, right? I don't know, who knows? I'm probably giving Marlon Brando more credit than he deserves, but obviously a brilliant actor, was an actor that was very troubled, right? So this was a very controversial decision that Francis Ford Coppola made. It was essentially Ford Coppola and Puzo vying for Marlon Brando, but the studio wanted nothing to do with him. At this point, Marlon Brando was on the outs with studios because he was a problem. He was known as a problem actor. So Puzo and Coppola had to use any kind of any kind of sway that they had to try to get Marlon Brando past the studio's approval, because one, they knew he was going to be very expensive, and this was already a budget movie to begin with, right? Francis Ford Coppola did not have the prestige that he has now. He was very much kind of a nobody, right? And Puzo maybe even less. Puzo's claim was that he wrote a best-selling novel, and well, he never wrote a screenplay, right? So right there, they're on the outs, and the studio is like obviously trying to clamp down and say, listen, we got to stay under budget. We really don't want this guy. And then it just took a lot of finagling. And then look at what you had. Imagine anybody else doing the Godfather, being Vito Corleone, other than Marlon Brando in that movie. Obviously, we know in part 2, young Vito is played by Robert De Niro, which is another interesting story. I can't wait to do that movie. But yeah, the second thing, and I know I'm getting a little bit long and a little verbose here, but the second thing to realize is this is post-World War II in the U.S., right? Obviously, it's a time of great prosperity. It's also a time of that's synonymous with the decline in hat wear. So that could also have been a piece that was pertinent here in that, okay, you saw a lot of people wearing hats, right? Maybe sometimes they carried them, but they didn't wear them. And when I say a lot, at the wedding, there wasn't a lot. I believe the one person that you can see wearing a hat or having a hat in his hand is what's his name? Barzini, which is he's another mob boss of a different family, of a rival family. He comes into the wedding as a show of respect. And he comes in with his hat in his hand. For the most part, you don't see a lot of hats, otherwise. The other place that you see hats are in the FBI agents. So if you see there, and a little bit later on, Sonny Corleone, the Godfather's eldest son, and the heir apparent, right? He goes out and essentially it builds his character. This is a guy that's obviously a tough guy. He's not scared of the FBI. He literally grabs the camera from one of the agents. I believe he's an FBI. I don't know if he's a reporter or an FBI agent, the guy that he grabs the camera on, presumably an FBI agent, grabs it, throws it to the floor in a fit of rage, and then immediately thinks better of it, and then throws a few dollars, a few bucks his way and said, "Here you go," and then goes off cursing. So that tells you already about the hothead that Sonny Corleone is right from the get-go. Yeah, I think it's an amazing building of characters here already.
There's a couple of good points I think you raised there on the hats, in so much as older gentlemen in the field, the established heads of the family were either wearing or had hats. Now, is that a case of they've been brought up since they were a child that everybody in their family pre-war would in fact never have left the house without a hat, and therefore it's installed in them? And is that a sort of cultural thing, which as hats were becoming less popular because of the rise of the car and transportation was getting better and so on, was it the younger generation that then just didn't adopt to taking the hats, but the older generation carried on, but to a lesser degree? And the second point was one of, you mentioned about the FBI agents, and of course, if you think about it, whether it's the police, the FBI, the fire brigade, whatever, they all wear headwear, even to today, and always have done. So is that a function of fashion, a function of protection in the case of fire brigade? I'm sure. In the case of the police, a uniform. But it's interesting that the hat, even though was losing popularity, was clearly an integral part of the uniform and the cultural communication of what those professions stood for in the big wide world. So I think that's an interesting point.
Yeah, and I will go even further here, right? So essentially the whole point of this initial scenes is and from a vantage point of a hat nerd, is the hatlessness. And it goes well beyond into carrying over into Michael Corleone. The main character in all of this, in this entire series, is Michael Corleone. He is in uniform. He is a war hero in uniform, except he doesn't have a hat.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't even know if you even see him wearing the hat. I'm trying to recall now. Obviously, I've seen it a couple times, but he may have had a hat in his hand, like his uniform hat, but he never wears it. Never wears it. And he's there introducing his then girlfriend, Kay, to the family, talking about his family, and he's quick to point out, I'm nothing like my family.
Yeah.
Which is a weird, it shows you the power of Michael, even in his youth, to rebel, even against somebody as important to him and as respectful as he is to his dad. So there's that reverence, but at the same time, he is courageous enough to say, I'm nothing like my family. I thought that adds a lot to that card. Like, wow, that's that's a strong character. And we already know, like later on, we find out that his dad, right? His dad reveals, one, he had no plans of him ever joining obviously his line of work, and also never joining the military. The fact that Michael Corleone joined the military was something that he did against his father's wishes. So it goes to show you the respect, at the same time, the courage that he had to stand up to his dad. And I got to think that his dad is thinking, wow, this kid, like, he's got something, right? He's got something in him. You know, we'll call it in New York speak, it's like, this kid's got a lot of balls,
yeah.
right? You know, he's got cojones. So I'm like, obviously respects his dad, loves his family, reveres his family, but at the same time is not opposed to making a decision that is against the family's wishes, which is an ironic thing in that later on what we know about Michael, right? Obviously, one thing I want to mention here, obviously there's going to be spoilers in here. I probably should have put that in the thing. I can't speak about this movie, I think, without doing spoilers. So if you've never seen this movie, first of all, where have you been? And second of all, just stop right now. Like I've already kind of talked and ruined some things, and we're going to continue doing that. So, you know, you're welcome to see this after you see the movie. But
well, I've
Paul,
got to admit, I put time in the diary to watch it yesterday, but unfortunately things happened that I couldn't. So it's been a few years since I've seen it last, but I'll watch it either tonight or tomorrow. But you know, but I think also the war, any war, makes youngsters grow up very quickly, and clearly, you know, there were millions of youngsters that never knew that they were going to be involved in such a tragic event, and they had a lot of growing up to do in a very short period of time. And I guess what that made them feel is that yes, they're expected to make decisions for their country and on behalf of their country and their fellow army recruits, that that they could make decisions in their own right in their family. You know, they weren't going to be kept under the thumb, as it were, by anybody else. They were going to be their own men. I guess there was a lot of that going on.
Yeah. So obviously, at this point, right, in the wedding, you're introduced to various family members. You get introduced into Fredo. Fredo, the first time I think you really see Fredo is him very, very inebriated, coming over to Michael and Kay and essentially kind of making a spectacle of himself. So, right, we saw Sonny, the hothead, very tough guy. Now we saw the middle Fredo, who is basically a lush, right, in US speak. This is a guy that you don't take very seriously. He can't even hold his liquor in his sister's wedding. So right there, you see kind of like the characters of one, the patriarch, as well as the three male siblings. We see Connie, who's at the wedding that you're attending. You even see Mama Corleone, singing along. She's just basically kind of like, keeping the party going, hosting, very revered and very respected. Everybody refers to her with respect, but really it's about the Don and his three boys here. Particularly Sonny and Michael are the juxtaposition. The other character that I want to talk about, which is no less important, is the character of Tom Hagen, the family lawyer, basically adopted brother for the Corleone siblings. And the book, I did not read the book, but the book goes a little more into the Tom Hagen character and how he got adopted more or less by Vito Corleone. But essentially, at this point, Tom Hagen is new in his post as the family consigliere. If you read the book and if you see some of the uncut version, you will see that there was a scene right after the wedding where the Vito Corleone's former consigliere, you see a lot more of him in part 2, Genco, right? His company is named Genco, and that's after Genco Abadando, which is the former consigliere. He's basically the Vito Corleone's best friend. You see that in part 2, where he works at Genco's father's bakery. So just a little foreshadowing there, right? They kind of cut that out from the final scenes, but they added it in the uncut version. They go see Vito calls his boys over, and they go over to the hospital to say goodbye to Genco and before he passes away. And then Tom Hagen, the new consigliere, comes in And right away, you see the hat. Tom Hagen's wearing a gray fedora because he is a serious professional. He's a businessman. And then on his first mission from his Don, he's going to go visit Waltz, a gentleman that's a director, right? It's that famous scene that leads up to that famous scene with the horse head. But you get to know about how serious a character Tom Hagen is and how he plays across from Michael and Sonny in particular. So yeah, so those I think are the main characters that you kind of see, and you start fed those characters. And two other characters that I'm going to talk about here, technically three, are obviously the two right-hand men of Vito Corleone, right? There's Tessio and there's Clemenza. And you get to know a little bit about them. They're obviously very serious men and revered. They go into that backstory in part 2, but they're usually in some sort of fedora. Very like dark fedoras. And I think the idea of color plays into, right? The color, not just the style of hat and the fact that you're hatless or not, but the style, right? Whether it's a homburg or fedora, and also the color. You see a lot of browns, a lot of grays, and a lot of blacks. But in particular, the juxtaposition between the gray and the black, where the black kind of is more of like that sinister, like this is not a character to be played with. Whereas the gray is something that Tom Hagen wears because he's a professional. He's not sinister. Like even though he's part of the family and the family business and protects the family, he's a professional. He's a lawyer, right? I just think that's amazing.
I think we still get a lot of that today, in so much as whenever I talk to a client for the first time, most of the time the clients are asking for a brown or a grey. Brown, grey, blue, and not so much black, funny enough, but those are the popular colours. But then when you get somebody in the entertainment world, on the edge of the entertainment world and so on, they seem to want something that's going to help them develop and give them a persona, a character, if you like, that they can hide behind personally, and they want it to be larger than life. So either the shape needs to be different or the colour. And in fact, the lighter colours, and look, there's some super colours coming out of the various felt manufacturers these days. Whereas back in the day, I'm sure that it was probably quite challenging to get some of the colours that we see today into the felts of the sort of 1940s, 50s, and what have you. So we're still seeing that people think that if you get a nice colour or a light colour felt, it must be expensive. That's not always the case. But you can get a very wide range of colours now in wool, but wool's a very difficult material and a cheaper material to work with, and unfortunately it loses shape when it gets wet, and it's quite difficult. I very rarely work in wool unless it's merino wool or cashmere wool or something. But I think that's still an interesting one, because people still think in the UK that if they want a fedora or a trilby, it's got to be of a traditional color. Now, the other interesting thing there is that it might just be because they've only got the means to have maybe 2 or 3 hats. And if you've got 2 or 3 hats, then as we were saying the other day, a blue, a black, a brown, a grey to go with your suits, your sports jackets, your jumpers, and so on, is probably the route to go. But it will be interesting to know how many hats people had, an affluent person had in the 1950s, 1940s, because I can only imagine that it was quite a wide wardrobe with all the spectrum of colours. Whereas the average man who was, and I remember back in the early 60s when my grandfather was, he was a manual worker, he was a labourer, bricklayer. He used to go to work with a cap or a trilby, and he'd wear a pencil in his cap, and he'd be on his push bike with his tools. But at the weekend, he always put a suit on. So on Saturdays, my grandmother and him would either take me or other grandchildren to town and then have a meal, and they go shopping, and he'd always have his fedora or trilby on. And likewise for Sunday when going to church. And it was a sort of cultural thing. So he probably had about 6 hats in his collection,
Wow. That's amazing. And you bring up a very good point. I think we'll bring that up very soon. Because I like in my mind, like I always deal with frameworks, right? So like I'll try to take a movie that's that big and try to cut it into its into smaller, biter-sized pieces So I feel like that's going to come back up soon, because I'm pretty sure, yeah, that's definitely going to come back up soon. The idea of the fedora, the felt hat versus the non-felt hat, right? That plays into this movie as well, right? We talked about like the style, the homburg versus fedora. Also, the style point would be the idea of the fedora / homburg, the felt hats, the flat caps where kind of like linen and wool, as well as the straw hat. I think that it probably doesn't become as apparent to but on repeat views, you start noticing those nuances in the movie itself. But we'll talk a little bit more about that. Two other characters, right, that are kind of pivotal in the story. One, obviously, Luca Brasi, right? They talk about him in the beginning in that wedding, right? Michael introduces Kay's like, who is that very scary man that's right there? Very imposing man. It's actually a gentleman. What's his name was Lenny Montana. Now, the insider information on Lenny Montana, the actor, is that he was no actor. He was a genuine member of organized crime. He was loaned. If you watch the series, the backstory, he was loaned to the set because, remember, and I mentioned this in a previous stream, the Colombo family out of New York made themselves involved with this movie, right? And the way the show describes it is this was pretty much at the behest of Frank Sinatra.
Okay.
So Frank Sinatra plays a role here, right? Because the singer, Johnny Fontaine, that comes to the wedding and then comes, and after he sings, he comes and asks the Godfather for the favor with that director, with the horse head. That character was patterned after Frank Sinatra. Now, Frank Sinatra, according to the lore, Frank Sinatra read the book and knew that character, that Mario Puzo, fashioned that character after him and was not happy about it. So when he found out that the movie was being made, he made a few phone calls and then got the awareness of this movie out to the families. And he just happened to raise the attention of Joe Colombo, who was then I think he was already the boss of the Colombo family. And there's a whole backstory to that as well. But it's talked about in that series. So now you already know that Luca Brasi was like, that guy can't act. He's like, he fits the role. But what it was is now the producer, I forgot, I think his name is Al Ruddy was the guy's name. He had to deal with the fact that the studio that he's working with does not want Marlon Brando. They ultimately did not want Al Pacino, and they wanted this film to be done quickly and cheaply. He also has to now juxtapose that with this Joe Colombo, who's a very scary man that is telling you, hey, this is what I want in that movie. This is what you're going to do. This is what you're not going to do. You're not going to mention the word mafia in any point in this movie. So Ruddy is trying to play both of these sides, and he does it brilliantly, at least according to the behind the scenes movie. I don't know how actually he did it, but the movie got made and became a hit, right? So he must have done something right. So now you know Luca Brasi, the actor, Lenny Montana, was there because, one, Joe Colombo had his goons around, right? And Ford Coppola saw Lenny Montana and said, hey, that's my guy. And then you see that famous scene where Lenny Montana is Luca Brasi is reading his lines to try to talk to Don, right? And say, I hope your first child is a masculine child. That wasn't scripted, meaning that was Lenny Montana in a corner reading his lines. And what happened was Ford Coppola had the presence of mind to film Lenny Montana as he's rehearsing his lines because he's very nervous. And it comes across very organic. That's brilliant to me.
Amazing. Yeah. I mean, look, it's an amazing film that's broken a lot of ground over the years. And what was also interesting is, and I might be wrong here, but I've not seen a new version of it. I've seen obviously the sequels and things, but nobody seems to have turned around and said, okay, let's update it. like they did with Charlie's Angels, The A-Team, and all
Right.
these other sort of movies that sort of were made on very tight budgets, but turned out to be very successful films. And they thought, okay, let's do it properly this time.
Yeah. No, I think that says a couple things. Obviously, it kind of says how daunting it would be to try, right? Because obviously everybody has very, very, like, there's, for Godfather Part 3, I think it's become a meme at this point that film did not hold to the standard of the first two films. So I think that one, I feel like The Godfather Part 3 left such a bad taste in people's mouths, where they tried to do a more kind of a reboot, right? And again, I don't completely poo-poo Part 3. I feel like it's a little overdone. Part 3 obviously is not as good as the others, but it's not like unwatchable, you know. But some people would disagree with me. I'll tell you that much. But I think it has something to do with Part 3. It also has something to do with how well Part 1 and 2 were done. That to try to do it and do it justice, I think a lot of people would probably laugh at it. There's been video games. They've done that. I don't think they've ever done a cartoon. I don't know how you could do a cartoon of The Godfather and be taken seriously. Obviously Homer Simpson has kind of like done that, because that's kind of what the Simpsons do. But yeah, I think that's a great point. And I think it speaks to, one, the flop that was considered for Part 3, and also how well Part 1 and Part 2, because a lot of folks will argue that Part 2 was actually superior to Part 1. And I happen to fall in that camp. And we'll get to that in another episode. I'll try to keep it at this. But to kind of pick back up, we talked about Luca Brasi. The other character that I want to introduce here before we move forward, right? We talked about Kay, but it's Sollozzo. Sollozzo is the character that really comes in and makes a statement, right? He comes in to meet with the Godfather. Already, the fact that the Godfather, right, that Vito Corleone gave this man his time for a meeting, already says something about how respectful and how high he thought of Sollozzo, right? He kind of already had his decision made. He kind of knew what Sollozzo wanted, but he still, out of respect, said, let's have this meeting. And Sollozzo right away comes in a really, I want to say, it kind of, in a way, in some angles, looks like a straw, but it's not. I think it's a felt fedora, but it's like white. It's either white or cream colored. With a black band. Looks really sharp. It juxtaposes against his dark suit, and it tells you one thing, right? One thing is that, one, I'm kind of I don't know. It plays on so many angles, right? The light fedora is in many ways kind of like a slap to the face, right? Like, right, I can see Sollozzo saying, I'm going to wear this fedora because I don't take you that seriously. Like, I'm serious enough. I can be a little bit more casual around you because I got bigger and better things going on. If you don't take my deal, then I got something in the back already planned. And maybe it was also a way to potentially disarm the serious characters that he was about to deal with. It's like, hey, I'm cool. Look at my hat. I'm no threat to you.
Yeah. I guess the other thing is that in having a pure white or cream hat in those days, it would have been an immense issue to keep it clean, and it would probably exude wealth and affluence. The fact that you've got something of such purity, and it's a what do you call it, a dichotomy. On the one side he's evil as heck, on the other side this is suggesting the purity of form. And so I don't know, it might be something along those lines as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, it's one of those things, like it can work on both angles, where it's like, okay, I'm no threat to you. I'm just this lowly guy that needs money, right? And obviously the Don does homework before he even meets with him and knows, and he reveals like, hey, so tell me what's in it for the Tattaglia family. And then right away, Sollozzo acknowledges that you did your homework and nods and said, well done, well played, right? And they're playing like a chess match here. Obviously, Vito shows a little bit of weakness in that Sonny, the hothead, his hothead oldest son, comes in and interjects, and then the Don puts him in his place and then corrects him afterwards. It's a very famous scene. Like, hey, what's the matter with you? Like, you don't speak. Like, you don't go and you don't let somebody else know what's going on with the family, outside the family. So you can see the Don showing that he is the guy that runs the show, and Sonny, as tough as he is, backs down. He says, sorry, Dad. Like, you know what I mean? He's like, I'm sorry. But right away, you see that Vito tells Sollozzo, hey, I respect you. You're in the drug business. That's not the business that I'm in. I'm going to have to say no. So that starts the ball rolling already in terms of, okay, this guy is not going to go away easily. Like, already Vito only has this meeting because he wants to see this guy firsthand. He knows his reputation. He knows, like Tom Hagen tells him, this guy is good with a knife. Like, but only in matters of business. Like, when he has to do it. So he has a tough reputation. So don't mess with this guy. So so he does that. But Vito is one, and you notice from part 2, regardless of what somebody's reputation is, he wants to see somebody face head on. He wants to look him in the eye to see what kind of person he is. So right there, Sollozzo reveals that he's not going to go away. And Vito knows this, and he brings in Luca Brasi to say, hey, follow this guy, and I want you to pretend that you're not happy with with our family anymore, and that you want to jump ship. So you can see that chess match playing out already, and it's amazing. So what do you see next? You see Luca Brasi getting dressed and putting on his dark fedora, putting on his bulletproof vest, and going out to go meet with Sollozzo. Really, really powerful scene. And obviously what happens to Luca Brasi is that he gets murdered, right? You see, it shows you something about how tough Sollozzo is, and he does it with a knife, right? He starts it off, he disarms Luca Brasi, this very ginormous man, and then gets him with his knife, and then while one of his henchmen chokes him out, and then sends the message back. It's like the chess move. He sends back the message to the family that says Luca Brasi sleeps with the fishes. It's amazing and powerful messaging that you're seeing here. And then the hats play along with it, right? The dark fedora tells you that Luca Brasi is not to be messed with. And by him being taken down by Sollozzo tells you more that Sollozzo is not to be messed with. Very powerful imagery.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? It's like if today you see somebody in a sharp suit and a black fedora, you would, if it's in and around certain areas of London, you might think they're part of a certain religion. If you see them in London's main shopping streets, you might think that they're making a fashion statement. But very rarely would you think it's a sinister statement. You know, right. It's an interesting how times change.
Yeah, and again, we have no idea like to what degree Mario Puzo and Francis Ford Coppola were hat people, but what we do know is that they employed costume designers, right? I think it was called Western Costume Company, and I believe that company still exists to today and still provides costumes for movie sets. But during that time, during the 70s, they were the costume designer set, right? So Paramount ponied up for Western Costume Company, and I had to think that if it wasn't Puzo and if it wasn't for Coppola, then at very least Western Costume Company came in as a consultant and said, "This is what you want to do." Maybe they gave him the script and said, "Okay, this character needs this kind of hat," And it's a beautiful. It's very much art, but you can see how the content experts come in to come together to create that art.
Do you think they bought hats off the shelf from established manufacturers like Borsellino or some of the hat code companies in America, or made them specially?
My research tells me it was a combination of both.
Right.
So Borsellino, Dobbs, and Knox were prominent, but it's hard to tell which hats in the movies were of each. Yeah. Now, one thing is that there were two hats that were put for sale that were from the movie.
Okay.
One was the famous black homburg belonging to Michael Corleone. And when you look at those photos, you can see that one, it's kind of a non-traditional looking homburg, to be honest. Like, it made me question the authenticity of the hat, to be honest. I'm going to just say that. But I have no reason to say, like, I have no reason to doubt that it wasn't. What happened was, one of the indicators that from the movie props was that Western costume company would put the names of the actors. They would sew them into the hats, so that when they were like, maybe they had a pile, they knew which hats to grab and who to give the hat to. So Al Pacino's hat, his homburg, his black homburg, was, when it was put for sale, it clearly says in the lining, Mr. Pacino. Marlon Brando's hat, his brownish, reddish brown fedora that he wears when he's assassinated, or when he's attempted to be assassinated for the first time in the grocery store, right in the street. That hat was also put for sale. I forget what type of money they fetched and when they were put for sale, but that one said Mr. Brando in the lining. So yeah, so you can see already, like, one, what role they had. I have to imagine that one, that homburg that I mentioned, it had in the lining Kevin McAndrew. So they took a Kevin McAndrew fedora or homburg, right? I have a feeling, like, to my eye, it looks like a fedora that looks like a homburg to me. But maybe it was on purpose. They said, okay, we don't have a homburg, a black homburg, but we have this fedora that we can make it look like a homburg.
Yeah.
And they took a Kevin McAndrew. I'm speculating here. They took a Kevin McAndrew fedora, made it look like a black homburg, and then gave it to Pacino and said, hey, this is the hat that you're wearing. And that's what they did. It looks like a homburg in the film. In that auction, it very much looks like a fedora that's shaped like a homburg. So yeah, hopefully that answers a little bit of your question, Paul.
Yeah. It looks like, I've just looked up on ChatGPT here, and it looks like the hat sold for around $11,500. Wow. Doesn't tell me what year that was, but
Pacino's hat did?
Yeah. A hat signed by Mario Puzo, Al Pacino, and Marlon Brando, related to The Godfather. This sold for $11,520 at Julien's auctions. Okay,
well, you know what? Do you think the audience, Paul, would like to see photos of those hats?
Yeah.
Well, then let me do that.
I haven't got any, but you might, yeah.
Let's do that. I'm going to try to share my screen. If you guys have been watching my any of my things, you guys know already that I have trouble. Like, it takes a couple bits, but I'm going to bring it up on screen. I'll bring you first Marlon Brando's hat that went for sale, and then I'll show you the black homburg. But it'll be as soon as this thing plays nice with me. I'll just keep doing it until it works. It always takes like a few takes. So pardon me while I do that. Come on. Oh, there we go. And then I will present it on stage. Paul, you seen that?
Here we go. Oh, right. All right. Yeah.
So let me go and I'll try to blow it up a little bit more. So this is the reddish brown fedora that and I presumably that Vito Corleone wore when he was shot on the street. And then so you can see nice, very classic fedora.
Yeah, it looks like a very lightweight dress weight, somewhere around 140 grams, and a nice sort of probably 6.5, 7 centimeter brim with about a 12 centimeter crown height. Interestingly, how inside the crown, they don't actually form it. I mean, like this one, for instance, I can see, I've formed it like this rather than having it as a free form like that, just to give it some clarity of shape. But in those days, they'd have a much softer felt, so it wasn't stiffened as much as some of the modern felts can be. Obviously, and it does look a very nice quality. So it's probably either a blend or a beaver felt hat. Very nice.
Yeah, Yeah, and
About
again,
15
I'm
mil.
just
Would you say it's
oh
about
yeah,
15 mil deep?
yeah,
The
yeah,
cross grain about 15 mil, and no a nice raw edge on it, which would suggest to me again that it's a bit heavier felt. You know, it's nice to see a raw edge. You know, when it's done
yeah,
nicely.
yeah. It's a beautiful, beautiful example. Now, again, we only have 2 photos of this hat. Again, just for our audience, I have no way to verify other than the auction says this was the hat that Marlon Brando wore. You know, so if that later gets debunked, I just want to put that out there. As of yet, nobody's debunked that this is not the hat. You know, at least not to my knowledge. So up until then, we will just assume that this is actually the hat. The next photo is kind of pretty convincing, right? We talked about, right? That was with the auction.
Ah, it's a Borsellino.
There you go.
It's without doubt. Looking at that label,
Yep.
and it's Alessandria, and in the bottom left hand corner, you can see the RIA on the end of the
Yeah.
logo and the 1900. So
Yep.
yeah, I'd put money on it. That's probably a Borsellino.
Yeah.
And that would make sense with the way that it's styled and the way that it's the color and the look and everything. It's very Italian, which is obviously going to be for the film being Italian.
Right. Yeah, and obviously you see, other than Mr. Brando, you see 2A, which I'm presumed to be second act. I have no idea. I'm speculating. If I had to guess, is this a movie prop? They probably wrote second act because maybe Brando wore a hat prior, right? I mentioned that cut scene of Genco Abandando when they visited the hospital. I can't remember because the version that I rewatched this week did not have, it wasn't the uncut version. But somebody here that might have remembered better than I do, whether the uncut version, whether the Godfather wears a hat. Part of me wants to say, yes, he did have a black homburg in that cut scene. And that will tell you a lot about like how respectful Vito Corleone, right? He says, I'm not wearing a hat for all you guys, but when I'm going to go visit my good friend in my consigliere, Genco, I'm going to don this black homburg. Again, I'm assuming that I'm correct, that he was wearing a black hat. And that would jive with the idea that in the second act, Mr. Brando wore this Borsellino, this reddish brown Borsellino, which is a beautiful, beautiful hat.
It's a great bit of product placement. I mean, how we're still talking about it now, all these years after it went live.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And then obviously in 1972, Borsellino was really thriving, right? When Hat Corporation of America and all the other domestic U.S. manufacturers were struggling, Borsellino in Italy was still okay, and probably they were okay because, well, there was less demand. I mean, meaning that they were picking up demand from the manufacturers that were losing out. So like Borsellino didn't really get into trouble until the 2010s, where they finally declared bankruptcy. So again, I'm presuming that Borsellino was doing still pretty well in the early 70s. This film was made in 1972. Borsellino was probably still doing well, while Hat Corporation America and its brethren in the U.S. were on decline and moving on the way out.
One thing it's possibly worth mentioning here, Luke, is that for all of the people that watch your videos, getting into hats, a lot of us started by, and I think you mentioned yourself, by buying secondhand hats. And I've been one of those that's been fortunate enough to buy the older 1960s, 70s, 80s Borsellinos, and they represent great value because, you know, a lot of the time over here in the UK, people have bought hats for special occasions. They've worn them once or twice, put them on top of a wardrobe. Unfortunately, the person in that family has either passed away or they've gone into a home and the children are left to dispose of it. And so they don't actually know the value of it. And so you can pick up an absolute bargain and restore it and get an absolute fabulous hat. I mean, the felt that was being used back in those days was extremely good. I mean, look, it's great today, but to think that a felt has lasted 50 years and it still can, with some steam, come back into shape and really look the part is quite something. I marvel every time I see it, to be honest.
I absolutely agree with you, Paul. And my Borsellino, I only own one Borsellino. It doesn't, not for lack of trying. It's just that, depending on where you look, right? Some Borsellinos are priced really competitively. And then other times, right? I think the folks that know what they have on their hands, they price them a lot higher. And hey, we got Morgan. Hey, Morgan, how you doing?
Hey, Morgan.
I've been a stranger. Morgan, you do not need to apologize. You are a moderator here, but that comes with no obligation. All of us have lives, so you can pop in and pop out whenever you like, Morgan. But I'm glad you're here. Yeah, we were just talking about the hats of the Godfather, and what's funny is that Morgan is somebody that has a juxtaposition, right? Me and Paul are really big on Borsellino. But Morgan happens to be somebody that's really big fan of Stetson, and she sold her Borsellinos. And again, I don't begrudge her, right? This is what's beautiful about our hat hobby. There's no wrong way to do hats. Some people, right? One man's or one person's trash is another person's treasure. Morgan says, no school today, so Fridays are perfect day for me to attend the lives. Perfect. Love to have you, Morgan. So Morgan, we were talking. We just outed you as somebody that's not as impressed with Borsellino and the quality of their felts. And you're welcome to opine, Morgan. Again, me and Paul happen to be big fans of Borsellino, and you already know probably the reason probably why Morgan got her Borsellinos, and she probably got them at Bencraft. Shout out to Steve at Bencraft. He had a great stock. His shop in Brooklyn had a great stock of pre-bankruptcy Borsellinos. Probably, I mean, who knows? Maybe he still has them. But just up to recently, he was well known on the Fedora Lounge because he happened to have. You could still get a pre-bankruptcy Borsellino from Steve at Bencraft well after up until recently. And Morgan, you probably know already what the status is of those Borsellinos. But my guess is that Morgan got her Borsellinos from Steve in Brooklyn. And then she just felt like they didn't do it for her. So she probably did well when she got rid of them, when she sold them, presumably. But yeah, then she got into Huff Bud. But I'm like, okay, you get a Huff Bud, that's no slouch.
That's one of the coolest hats around. I mean, look, hat makers around, and it's interesting that you say about the styles and the hats, because I think it takes a little while to find out what suits you and what do you feel comfortable with. Because let's be fair, when you're wearing something like a statement piece, you have to feel, when you're wearing it out, confident.
Correct.
And, it's going to make you feel confident, and you need to feel confident. And then when you feel confident and that comes across, people are interested, intrigued, and look on with favor. They think, yeah, that looks cool. Or very rarely do you get any negative responses. But yes, you find a particular hat maker and you go with it.
Paul, you raise a great point, and this is something I will repeat because a gentleman asked it on one of the Facebook groups. What's the most important thing? And I mentioned this on a previous stream. What's the most important thing or feature of a hat? When picking one out and choosing to keep one in your collection. And I immediately responded, the most important thing is how it makes you feel when you put it on.
Yeah, it's a very good point. And I mean, look, all the technical stuff about what you're going to use the hat for, what are your expectations in terms of its wear and tear, what sort of budget you've got, and so on. They sort of fall by the wayside because, unfortunately, you fall in love with a hat when you see it. It's like one of the first hats I fell in love with was actually an Akubra, a brand from Australia, which was it's a working man's hat. It's now become much more of a statement piece in terms of a fashion statement with multiple different choices of designs. And in fact, actually, talk about Borsellino going bankrupt. I think that the guys at Akubra got taken out. I don't think they went bankrupt. I think they went. They were purchased by a bigger company and have expanded more. But there's another interesting brand that people in the UK, they tend to be in the horsey crowd and love their fields for walking and stuff. It's a big brand over here. I don't know how much of a big brand it is in America.
Yeah. I mean, again, it's hard for me to compare because I've not been to the UK. But I do know, if you go, my litmus test has always been the Fedora Lounge. and Borsellino, right? There's a thread dedicated to Borsellino called the Borsellino Brotherhood. And that gets to show you right there how people feel about that brand. And not that there aren't other, like obviously there's the Stetson brand, the threads, but Borsellino is one of those brands, right? And obviously the movies add to the cachet, the Borsellino movies from France. I just feel that because Borsellino thrived when a lot of other manufacturers went and fell, it has a special place. It's one of those legacy brands that probably will never, like it will never wane, right? So we talked about Lock & Co. in terms of hat shops. It's the longest continuously running hat shop, hat brand, right? Right. They have a shop. You can still get a Lock & Co. Brand new from them, made for you. But that history probably will carry on, probably well beyond if it ever does go away. They're iconic, right? You can't put something on it. That brand is priceless.
Yeah, I mean, interesting enough with people like Borsellino, my understanding is from the little research I've done is that Borsellino made their own felts, and so they controlled the production from cradle to grave, and I think that's probably if you can afford to buy the equipment and invest to that level, then you control your destiny. A lot of hat makers today, me included, we have to buy in all of our materials, and so therefore the price is dictated to us, and really the only price that we've got as a variable is our time, and we look at what we believe we need back for the time that we put in, the hourly rate to cover our own time, purchase of equipment, renewal of equipment, and buying all of the materials and so on, and then price a hat accordingly.
Absolutely.
It's an interesting thing. I don't know how many in America, but there must be. I know Stetson make their own felts, but I don't know who else does.
The only one. Okay, this is a fact that there's two facts that I'm going to repeat from previous live streams. One, in the U.S., according to ChatGPT, Resistol is the only brand in the U.S. that controls the entire process from getting the felt all the way. It's a 200-step process. And apparently you can YouTube how a Resistol felt hat is made on YouTube and see the process. They have a very similar video for their straw hats. So again, I can't, obviously not everything on ChatGPT can be taken as gospel. But that's something that I got from ChatGPT, that Resistol is the only brand. We do know that Resistol and Stetson are tied closely together in manufacturer. So I don't know if we can extrapolate to Stetson. Maybe Morgan's more of a Stetson expert than I am. Maybe she can opine on what she knows. But yeah, as far as I know, Resistol is the only brand. But that's that's what I read from ChatGPT.
I think in the UK we certainly look at Resistol as being the working man's hat. It's a very the few that we see over here tend to be very robust felt, very stiff, well made, well constructed. And they take a while when you put them on your head. They take a while to form in your head shape. So when you put them on, first of all, they feel very cardboard-like, if you like. Like putting a shoebox on your head. But then once they've actually worn in, they're much, much better. And I think Stetson really, again, in our eyes over here, are much more dressy hats than Resistol. Yet, as you say, they're brother and sister companies. So it wouldn't surprise me if the same mold is used for both brands, but they're just different felts and different finishing.
Yeah. And I believe they're both manufactured in Garland, Texas. So I believe they do tours. So if any of you guys are in Garland, Texas, I know if I'm ever in that neck of the woods, I'm going to try to see if I can get a tour, and I mentioned that on a previous live stream that I'll try to video, but they may not allow it. So I'll do what I can to bring you guys photos from Garland, Texas. I don't have a plan right now, but that's in the future. If I can do, or maybe one of our subscribers gets a chance to go out there and beat me to it. Maybe they can share the video and come on here and share what they found out. The other tidbit I'm going to add here for completion's sake is that, like Paul mentioned, Borsellino does seem to control the process from beginning to end. But at some point, I mentioned this during my my Celentino video, that at some point, Borsellino had trouble meeting demand for their felts. So they actually had to reach out to Tonak in the Czech Republic and source some of their felts to meet the demand. So one, that automatically, right? Just like we talked about how Sollozzo and Vito Corleone play against each other in terms of that chess game, it tells you a lot about how Borsellino, what Borsellino thought about Tonak as a felt provider, that they were willing to put their brand on the line to source. So that automatically to me says, okay, Tonak's a real deal. Obviously, Borsellino is really shrewd and really all about making sure that their customers are happy. It really made me smile when I saw that, when I learned that piece of information. And I hope it's true. It's just something that I learned from ChatGPT. And maybe one day we'll get Steve Heck out here and he can verify that, or either confirm or deny. I just sometimes I will go and I'll take these things as fact until I get proven otherwise. And so just so you know, if that gets debunked later on, then I'll try to make sure I keep you guys up to date. But I wanted to continue on here with that black Homburg, or at least the one that was for sale. This is the Homburg. And again, it doesn't look like a Homburg to me. It looks like it has a pencil thin brim. I'm even trying, I'm struggling to make out the brim binding here, but maybe it does have a brim binding, which would be Homburg-esque.
Yeah.
But it looks like a fedora to me. Paul, what do you think?
Yeah, it's one of those hybrid hats, isn't it? It's instead of it's actually coming inwards as in its profile. I mean, if you look at this, is a typical English Homburg, and you can see the profile there is very much with this center crease, and it's straight up at both ends. It's got a 50 mil trim, but the brim on a Homburg is very much in this style. It's very up on both sides and down at the front, and it's very much what happens is they take the felt, the trim, and they sew it on the felt so that it's actually on the inwards, and then they fold it over and then stitch it underneath. So it's probably a 20 mil, an 18 or 20 mil trim that goes around here, and then it's put on the block, but then it's actually worked around with the irons so that you can actually get more of a curl in it. So it's not an easy process to go through, but that either has been in the studio and got hot, wet, and lost its shape, and nobody's had the ability to put it back into the shape, which could well be because if they're on set and it does rain or whatever and so on, and they don't have anybody that's got the steamers and the brim blocks and the curlers and the ability to do it, then it could well be that. But it's very similar to some hats that I've owned before that aren't Homburgs. So who knows? Yeah.
And again, it's a movie. Again, I will show you a still shot from the movie later on, and we can see. I don't know, the Homburg. To me, the Homburg that is worn by Al Pacino later in the film does not look like this Homburg. It looks like a true Homburg. Now, again, we do know that there is, and I'm kind of stealing some of my own thunder here. They never said that this was the Homburg, meaning this was the Homburg. This is just a Homburg, right? We know that sets will sometimes they'll lose a hat, in the process of shooting from one moment to another. Maybe they had several Homburgs and they used them interchangeably. Maybe there's a scene that was cut from the movie that showed this Homburg, and maybe Ford Coppola and his wisdom said, okay, that's not a real Homburg. Who knows? I'm speculating here, but there's a variety of reasons for why scenes are cut, and maybe, just maybe, this was cut because I don't know, for whatever reason. We do know that Michael does wear a fedora, right? He does wear a fedora. It's something that may be lost on some people. but you can pick it up if you go and look at the next major act in the movie. But before that, I'm going to show you some of the insides of that hat, because we talked about Western costume, right? Western Costume Company. So you can see it very prominent here on the sweatband. So right here it says Western. It's a little faded, but it says Western Costume Company, Hollywood, California. And then it says Mr. Pacino, number 4. So I don't know if that means act 4. Again, it just says Mr. Pacino, number 4. So whatever that means. So that's the sweatband. And I will show you the lining of that very hat. And you can see it says very clearly Kevin McAndrew. So go ahead, Carl.
Oh, I'm just trying to see what it says underneath the bottom there.
Oh, the bottom. Let me see if I need to. Let me know if I need to scroll. I'll try to. This is only as good as the photo. It says hat maker. This says hat maker. But I don't know what it says underneath.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, that would probably suggest that it's been handmade by Kevin McAndrew, and specifically for it.
Yeah, or it could have been. They could have taken an off the shelf, right? Maybe gotten one from Kevin McAndrew, or bought one off the shelf. I don't know. I don't know the answer because I'm not as familiar with Kevin McAndrew, the brand. They sourced one and they made it and modified it to look more Homburg-ish for a scene, or until they can get their hands on a true Homburg.
It's very interesting that the heraldry in that is very sort of Germanic, with the eagle there in the middle. That would suggest to me it's a nod to the heritage of the Homburg. Right.
Interesting. Yeah. So that is these photos. These last 6 photos that I showed were from the auctions for these 2 hats. So Brando's reddish brown Borsalino is what we verified, and this black Homburg-looking fedora by Kevin McAndrew. Both sold for a pretty penny. I don't have the dates on them, but Paul mentioned the price on the Borsalino, I believe you mentioned, right? Yeah. So again, fetched a pretty penny. I can see why somebody would want to have the actual an actual hat from there. I have no idea what happened to the other hats, to be honest. But
what's interesting is also, sorry to interject there.
No worries.
What was interesting is that if you look at Raiders of the Lost Ark and the original hat there from Herbert Johnson. Now, I might be wrong here, but I've got a feeling it sold for about $500,000. I'm not sure it's pounds or dollars, but it went for a huge amount of money. And quite frankly, when you think about both hats, this I wouldn't have said that the Pacino hat was that far behind the iconicness of. I mean, don't take it away from the guys at Herbert Johnson, because it is a cracking design and a beautiful hat, etc. But the price difference between $11,500 and $500,000 or whatever it was is a huge difference, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I don't know. Like, obviously, everything happens in a moment of time. We don't know how the economy was, right? An auction is no different than any other auction, in that, depending on how prosperous somebody's feeling at that time, that will dictate how high these auctions. Obviously, inflation's another matter, and we do know that we've had a lot of inflation. So I did not adjust any of the prices that I've seen for inflation. But either way, even if I took them at their current amount, I'm like, that's an expensive hat.
Well, I've just checked it on ChatGPT, and the Raiders of the Lost Ark hat sold for $520,000.
Wow.
We'll come on to that on another video. Pardon me?
Does it have a date of the auction?
Yes, September 2018.
Okay, all right. So that's not that long ago. So we're talking about 7 years ago. Yeah. Okay. I mean, we had a lot of inflation since then, but depending on who you ask, I think. You ask some economists that come up with the numbers, they'll tell you a much lower number. But if you buy a dozen of eggs, you'll know how much inflation we've had. Yeah. Sorry, I won't get into that soapbox. I won't get political.
Yeah.
Yeah. So okay. So moving forward from that hat, we talked about the next iconic scene, which is at the hospital, right? When Michael is visiting his dad. His dad is supposedly being protected, and nobody's around. So Michael springs into action. He basically says, "I'm with you, Pop." So for many people, that scene represents at least two potential points of transition in Michael the character. It represents like that line, "I'm with you, Pop," literally signifies he's verbalizing that he's on board. I'm no longer not trying to be like you. I'm here, right? And you can see that he immediately calls his brother Sonny, and Sonny says, "Don't panic." And Michael immediately replies, right? His brother Sonny is nobody to be messed with, even if you're his younger brother. Michael immediately hotly replies, "I won't panic." I'm like, holy cow, Michael. Like, again, another showing of those Michael, his balls, right, so to speak. Sorry to be crass. He's his gumption. He's telling Sonny, "I'm not gonna panic." I'm taking care of Pop here. So he doesn't ask. He tells the nurse, "Let's move my dad." And the nurse tries to give him some like back talk. He's like, "You know who my dad is? Let's move him now." And she complies. It goes to show you Michael asserting himself in the name of protecting his family, his dad, from would-be assassins. So he moves his dad. He's looking out. Now all of a sudden, Michael's like springing into action. Like, this is a war hero, mind you, a World War II war hero, decorated hero. Now saving not his country but his family. He sees out, and then he sees Enzo the baker, come out in a hat. I think Enzo's wearing a hat, and Enzo's like, okay. He doesn't see Enzo, like he's now using Enzo as a prop to save his dad. He takes Enzo outside. And he says, "Listen, there's going to be some very bad men coming here. I want you to pretend like you have a gun in you, and make sure that he fixes Enzo up to look like a henchman, and says, pretend you have a gun." And you can see how nervous Enzo is, even though he says, "I'm going to help you out because your dad helped me out." You remember that from the earlier scene in the wedding, where Enzo is helped out by Don Corleone. Just trust me on it if you don't remember. So Enzo is paying it, but he's very nervous. He's not a gangster. But what he does is, you can see very nervously, he's trying to light his cigarette. He cannot light it because he's so nervous. And Michael, he verbalizes, "I'm with you here, Pop," earlier. Now, visually to the audience, Michael calmly grabs the lighter from Enzo and seemingly watches his own hand, his very still hand, as he calmly lights the cigarette for Enzo. And you can see that Michael himself is even surprised that he's not nervous. He's not nervous in the least bit. He's fully committed and sees it. He's kind of like recognized, kind of like that moment of self-reflection, even though it's a very tense moment. He's like surprised at his own calmness. It's a very telling, for me, that's the point when Michael transitions from the young kid, the hatless kid, to the guy that we'll see later on in the film. That's the pivotal transition point to me. So so obviously we'll see, obviously, Paul, feel free to cut me off. I'm getting like really into this. But we see the very next major scene is the major meeting when Michael coordinates and volunteers himself that he's gonna kill not only Salazzo, but he's also going to kill the police officer McCluskey, the police captain, I believe, that's corrupt, and it's in Salazzo's payroll. And you can see how his family doesn't take him very seriously. Like Sonny says, "What is this nice college kid's going to come in here and try to commit murder?" He's like, "What do you think? This is like war? You got to cut you, and this is not war. You get to shoot him from far away. You got to get really right up close and personal and bang, right?" So he's very animated and like telling, like, my kid brother's like, we can't take him seriously. But Michael's like, no. Right? He has that famous line. This is not personal, right? This is business. And even Tom Hagen's like surprised and like, because he's telling Tom and saying, Tom, wouldn't the newspapers love a scene, like a story where a corrupt cop gets what he deserves? And Tom is like surprised, like, holy cow, Michael, you're right. You might just be right, right? So you can see how his own family, they think they know Michael, but they're seeing a new side to Michael, and they're buying in. Even Clemenza's like, holy cow. He starts showing Michael how to shoot a gun. Michael's cracking jokes, but he's gonna do a very serious thing here. And like it leads up to that very famous scene in the Italian restaurant where Michael, right before that, he gets picked up. And what do you see there? Right when he gets picked up in the restaurant, Michael's wearing a fedora. For the first time, he's wearing a hat, but not just any hat. It's a very dark fedora right before Sollozzo and McCluskey pick him up to go to have this meeting. So Michael's got the fedora on throughout the whole ride. He's kind of a little bit nervous, right? He's like, what's going to happen? Like, I hope this goes as planned, because right now Michael doesn't even know where they're going, that they're actually going to travel to the place where they think they're going to go, right? Once they pull up to the place where Michael knows he's going to have the gun hidden, Michael, you can see that he's a little bit calmer. He's like, okay, we're at the right place. And Michael has that very famous exchange with Sollozzo in Italian, where Michael is obviously Al Pacino does not know Italian. So as the actor, there are three things that you should know about Pacino, the actor, at this point in stage. One, he's never he doesn't know Italian, right? So that's something that the studio would probably threw in the face of Coppola and Puzo. This guy doesn't know Italian. The obvious thing is he's very short. So they were saying, why we're going to go and take this guy, Pacino? He's short. He's a midget, right? I'm sorry for using that term, but this is a term that they actually probably used to describe Pacino. He's like, nobody's going to take this guy seriously. He's short. You need a tall leading man, right? Kind of like Guy Williams in Sorrow. He's 6'3". He's suave and debonair. He's like that interesting man, suave, debonair, tall guy. Pacino was not. I forget how tall Pacino was, but maybe like 5'7", 5'6", something, 5'8" maybe on his best day. So the other thing is Pacino did not know how to drive a car. He also did not know how to dance. So you can imagine that he's like, I'm sorry. Like, you can imagine when these things came up during the filming, Pacino's probably half apologizing, but he's using it as fuel that I'm going to give an extra good performance, because I already know that these guys are fighting for me. So you can see automatically now, right, the beginning of the eyes. Very famous. Besides the hat, the Pacino eyes are something that it probably took precedence earlier on, but you really see it in that exchange with Sollozzo, where Pacino's like got these stone cold killer eyes, like shark eyes. They have that blank stare, that expressionless stare that's telling Sollozzo. Remember how Vito confronted Sollozzo earlier? Sollozzo's looking across the table from him. He came into that meeting thing that he was going to push over Michael, but Michael let him know with the eyes, that blank stare, that you don't hold all the cards here. So you can see in very real time this acting, this very powerful acting that's nonverbal, in addition to the verbal communication that's going on in this table. And you got this McCluskey character here that Michael's dealing with, but not even acknowledging. Like, he won't break the gaze of Sollozzo throughout that exchange. And he gets to the point where he goes and he asks for permission, just like he was instructed. He asked for permission to go get to the restroom. Obviously, we know what happens then. He comes back with the gun, and then assassinates very calmly and very efficiently. Assassinates both Sollozzo and McCluskey, and then flees the scene very calmly. I think maybe either wearing the fedora right? So he wouldn't be seen, or he has it in his hand. I can't remember which one. Very powerful scene, very iconic. So, Paul, I just want to make sure I give you a chance to interject. That was a lot.
I was just getting into it. I think how on earth you remember all of this, I don't know. But I'm going to look at the film in a different way when I see it later.
Yeah, and Paul, thank you. I think I'm pretty flattered by that. I have, like, and back when I used to work, when I started working, I always was a chatterbox, and I used to get called IMDb Luke because I seemingly had the ability to recall scenes that other people, like, I watched that movie several times and I don't remember. And sometimes what will happen is I'll mention it, somebody calls bullshit on me, then they'll rewatch the movie and they say, "You're freaking right." Like, how do you remember that?
Fantastic skill. Yeah.
Anyway,
brilliant.
I don't know where I got that from, but I don't have a memory for anything else other than movies, I guess. I don't know. Sometimes numbers. Sometimes numbers I can do that with.
Well, this is fun. I mean, this is useful for anybody that either has seen the film to relate to it, but also if you haven't seen the film, you're going to go out after listening to this. You're going to go out and you're going to have a look, even if you flick through it. And that's great. That's what I mean. The hats that we've discussed so far have been very interesting. I mean, it is just an interesting thing how a hatter gets called and they have to create something that will give I guess a persona for that person that will create memories and actually be a real big part of the film. It's a big responsibility for a hatter to do.
Absolutely. So now I don't want to belabor this too much, but I'm going to move on to the next major act here, right? So obviously, Michael has just committed this assassination. He essentially defends his dad from would-be attackers, but now is advised to flee to Sicily under the protection of Don Tomasino, a good personal friend of Vito Corleone. And at this point, Vito is still in a coma. I think right before it cuts to Sicily, Vito wakes up from the coma, and then it's a very touching scene with him and Tom Hagen, where Tom basically explains to Vito Corleone what has occurred. And you can see that look on Vito Corleone's face of like, I didn't want this to happen. I didn't want this to happen. I didn't mean for Michael to get involved in all this, And then right away it cuts to Sicily. And then what happens in Sicily? Well, besides the beautiful cinematography, right? What my understanding is of the film, that they did shoot in Sicily, but they had to switch locations at least once because the very real organized crime, the mafia in Sicily, was hassling the crew. So they had to switch locations at least once. At least if what is said in the movie, the television series, is to be believed, the very real members of the Sicilian organized crime in Sicily were pressuring them and saying, "Well, what are you doing here? Like, you don't have our permission to do this." So they had to kind of film very, very carefully in Sicily. But what you're seeing are very real shots of Sicily in various parts, and you see some beautiful mountain landscapes, and you see a very different Michael. You still see a hatted Michael, but it's a different hat. So I will show you one of the iconic scenes, and you can see some of the dialogue here in this translated. Very famous line: "In Sicily, women are more dangerous than shotguns." And this is a scene that Michael, he struck like a thunderbolt upon seeing Apollonia for the first time, a woman that's walking with children, probably a school teacher. She's walking with children, and he struck. And his bodyguards, this is one of his bodyguards, I forgot his name. The other bodyguard is Fabrizio. And you can see the hats that they're wearing. They are wearing traditional workers' hats for what somebody would wear if you were a field worker and you did manual labor in the south of Italy. So obviously Sicily is part of, like, if Italy was the boot, Sicily would be that thing that boot is kicking. So, sorry if that's, hopefully I'm not offending anybody by that. it's something that's been described to me by a lot of Sicilians when they're describing their country and where it's located in relation to Italy. What they would say is that you see the boot of Italy, Sicily is that thing that boot is at the very tip of, kind of like it's kicking that boot. And if you know a little bit about the interplay among Sicilians and other Italians, you know that there is, especially Sicilians and Neapolitans, there's a very rivalry that's captured in the movie Gotti, right? In organized crime, there's a lot of members of Sicilian ancestry, and there's also a lot of members of Neapolitan ancestry. So Paul Castellano, who John Gotti and Sammy Gravano murdered, was Sicilian. John Gotti was Neapolitan. So they tended to butt heads a lot because there was that rivalry that existed between Sicilians and Neapolitans. I won't speak any more on that because I'm not an expert on that, but that is a thing. So here, Michael is wearing a flat cap that is consistent with the flat caps worn. Again, I can only speculate because I'm not an expert on flat caps nor Sicily. I have been to Sicily once. It's a beautiful hat, very beautiful hat. I actually have a photo of Michael Corleone in this hat hanging up right across from me. That's a photo that I'm actually in the process. I'm probably going to replace it or take it down because my motif is fedoras, homburgs, bowlers, and pork pies. The flat cap is not my motif. So for right now, I'm going to make a change in my own office. I'm going to take down, I've already have a picture on the way of Michael Corleone in a homburg. It's a much smaller photo, but it's going to fit in. Paul, I don't know if you've been on live stream when I showed my photos, but I have 3 photos hanging up in my office. Right here, I have on my left Rocky Balboa from Rocky 2, where he's wearing the hat tilted fedora. It's very, very beat up hat from Rocky 2. To the right of me, hanging up, is the picture of the Rat Pack in their fedoras, in their hats from the movie Robin and the Seven Hoods. If you haven't seen any of those 2 movies, obviously, I think most people have seen Rocky 2. Maybe not a lot of my viewers have seen the Robin and the Seven Hoods. Not a great film from a quality standpoint, but very good film for hats. I recommend it. If you know Frank Sinatra, you know he's an icon for hat wearing, especially the trilby style, right? But also for the hat tilt. Those 2 styles are iconic Frank Sinatra styles. So to pay homage, I have a photo of Dean Martin, Frank Sinatra, and Sammy Davis Jr. Dino and Old Blue Eyes are wearing their fedoras. Sammy Davis Jr. is wearing his black bowler. So I love it. And then across from me is a very large photo of Michael Corleone in Sicily. And again, I'm going to replace it. I don't know if I'm going to sell that photo. If you happen to live nearby me and you want to buy that photo from me, it's for sale. But if nobody buys it, maybe I'll keep it and maybe put it somewhere else in my house. But this is kind of the next juxtaposition, a next act of Michael, and it shows the evolution of Michael's hat wearing in the film. And obviously, you kind of already know what happens in Sicily. Michael is betrayed by one of his bodyguards, one of the bodyguards that's not pictured here, Fabrizio. Salazzo happens to go and cut a deal with presumably Salazzo. Oh, no, sorry, not Salazzo, because Salazzo's dead. The real enemy at this point, right? Salazzo's dead at this point. Whoever's still trying to go after Michael to get the revenge has corrupted Fabrizio, one of Michael Corleone's bodyguards, maybe promised him passage into America. It's actually a cut scene that was deleted from the movie where Michael Corleone, right? Fabrizio tries to kill Michael, but instead kills his wife, Apollonia. And Michael later gets revenge, and he's wearing a great fedora. So if you watch the uncut version, you will see the scene where Michael finds Fabrizio and gets his revenge with a shotgun and wearing a very fine fedora and shotguns Fabrizio to death. So just again, if you don't like spoilers, you tune into the wrong stream. So I wanted to cut there and leave it there alone. Paul, do you have anything to say about the flat cap or anything about that before I move on?
I think from our standpoint over this side of the pond, so to speak, the flat cap has got a whole host of history. Very, very popular, and a bit of a resurgence recently in the Baker Boy cap and so on. And there's still many manufacturers that make it, both here and in Ireland. And so I want to say that if I look at one or two of the fashion houses that are UK based, they do have flat caps in their range. And so whilst it's not booming, I'd say that there is a small resurgence of people wearing them.
Right, correct. I mean, the gentleman that I always point out is a gentleman called Fabio Van Hurst or Horst. He is a gentleman, I believe, in Brazil. He's on the Fedora Lounge. He's also on Facebook. He has a tremendous fedora collection, but he also has a tremendous flat cap collection. And he's one of those guys I think of that when I see photos, I'm like, if somebody makes me want to wear a flat cap, is that gentleman. So shout out to Fabio. You have impeccable style. I don't know if I could ever come close to pulling off a look like that, but I do admire it. So we talked about that often, about like how hats kind of push us sometimes to be better people and also to become better dressers. I'm still very much a casual guy at heart, and you will see this, but it doesn't mean I don't admire the look that's in The Godfather and the look of the folks that really dress up. There's another gentleman called GHT, and I forget, I think he's in the UK, an older gentleman that's on the Fedora Lounge. I don't remember his real name, but he also dresses up really great, has an iconic, usually has a very old automobile that's behind him. I don't know if it's his automobiles. I presume it's his, but sharp looking car with a sharp outfit, really great. So just want to plug those guys because I love the Fedora Lounge and I love seeing other people in their hats and in what they wear with their hats. So obviously we know what happens here. The second thing that happens that is the catalyst of Michael, right? So obviously he just lost his wife. He's very much become a man, right? Or he was kind of grooming himself to marry Kay in the United States, comes to Sicily, doesn't know how long he has to stay there, falls in love, becomes a man, right? Has presumably his very first relations, for lack of a better term, with his wife, and then loses his wife. So if you didn't think that Michael grew up by having gone to war and having killed a man to save his family, he really grew up in that he got married for the first time in a foreign land, courted his wife, did all that thing, and then was betrayed by somebody that was very close to him and lost his wife. So when you start building the character arc for Michael Corleone, you're like, holy cow, this kid has done it basically all. He's already lived several lifetimes in experience at a very young age already. And on top of that, after all that happens, he learns, right before that. So, right, the reason why his wife is killed is that he's packing his bags because he's just learned that he has to go back to America because his older brother, Sonny, was just assassinated. Right? So that already tells you that Michael being betrayed and Sonny Corleone being assassinated means that there's somebody else. There was some other puppet masters that's pulling the strings, and Sollozzo wasn't the end of it. So now Michael Corleone goes back to the States, right? Vito essentially comes back and says, and has this big meeting with the other mafia dons, but it's not just a meeting that he's done for willy-nilly. There are two purposes for Vito calling this meeting of the families. And it's a very prominent meeting, and it's important. And it tells you how sharp Vito still is, even after he's gone, essentially come out of a coma. He goes and he sees Tattaglia, who Sollozzo implicated as a conspirator, but you also see Barzini at the same table. And just like Vito Corleone does, he wants to see both of these guys face to face, so he can suss out who's the real puppet master. And in a very famous scene right after that meeting, he's talking to Tom, and he reveals to Tom that, because Tom is like, we got to watch out for the Tattaglia guy. And Vito says, I already know Tattaglia is not the guy. He's not strong enough to have pulled what we saw here. It was Barzini. That famous line, it was Barzini. So it goes to show you, right? So he's there to tell at that meeting to tell one, to suss out who's the real guy that's behind this, and to tell them point blank, I already lost a son. Tattaglia, you've lost a son. If my son, my youngest son, comes from America and something happens to him, I'm gonna personally hold everybody in this room responsible. And you guys already know that I'm gonna make good on that. So it tells you like the kind of like the fighter that Vito still is, and he's doing it because just like Michael, his son, saved his life, he's gonna make sure he's gonna do whatever possible that Michael's not gonna get harmed, because he already knows that he can't do this for a long time. When Michael comes in, he's gonna very much protect Michael because he knows that the only way that the Corleone family is going to survive is if Michael takes over. So then brings in Michael in the very first scene that we see him in the United States is this. Look at this Michael Corleone. A Michael Corleone we have not seen up until this point. But again, this is a Michael Corleone that has been a war hero, a Michael Corleone that has killed two men to save his family, and a Michael Corleone that's already married and been betrayed and lost his wife because of it. So right there, that blank stare that he has is a man that's undergone a lot of trauma, but he's covering himself. This costume that he's adorned himself serves two purposes. One, they're kind of a preemptive strike to anybody that wants to mess around with him, right? He wore a flat cap and was betrayed and was done in by Fabrizio and whoever told Fabrizio to try to murder him. So this costume works on two levels. It tells anybody that's looking at him is, don't trifle with me. I'm a serious man. And he goes, his first exchange is with Kay. And Kay's looking at this man. It's like, this is not the Michael that I knew before. And Michael's telling her, I'm not the same guy. Like that guy that I told you about, like I'm different. Like, I don't even know if he verbalizes it or not, but he certainly gives that impression when you're watching this. And the homburg, the famous black homburg, really hits that message home. It's a classic look of power. You'll know Winston Churchill made the homburg really famous. He was probably the guy up until this point in history that's synonymous with the homburg. And you have that famous photo of Winston Churchill rocking the Tommy gun, right? You know, it's like you can speak softly but carry a big stick. That goes to show you that you got to think that Puzo and Fort Coppola were trying to invoke the image of maybe somebody like Winston Churchill, who's like he's there to like, I'm here to. It's kind of like that Latin saying, vis pacem, para bellum, which translate into, if you want peace, prepare for war. This is an iconic photo, iconic shot. Paul, I just want to make sure I get you in here because I know you have the black homburg behind you.
Yeah, I'm just looking, I can see it slightly, and I think it possibly is the same hat as you were showing earlier, but okay, certainly
let me try to go a little bit. If you ask me, Paul, again, you might be right, but if you ask me and I go in here, it looks like it has kind of like that curl, but maybe you're right. Maybe because from this angle, it's difficult to tell.
I think it has the curl, but I think it's the actual hat. I think the actual hat you've got has lost the curl in the brim. I mean, it's one of the challenges with hats, how you look after them, what weather you go out with them, and them keeping their shape. I mean, as most of us that have a few hats know, that if you introduce steam into them, they will go back into shape. But I think the one you had didn't quite do that. But this one I've got here is a Scots of London hat, and I don't even think it's been worn. I mean, it's that good. It's an older hat. It's a much smaller size, which means unfortunately I can't wear it. But it says Hatters to His Majesty the King and the Royal Family. Well, that would have been pre-1953. So this is probably about a 1940s hat by Scott's, the Hatters, that were, I'm reading inside here, number 1 Bond Street. And of course, Bond Street is a very fashionable upmarket street in London. And it's just a lovely hat. I wish I had a small enough head to wear it. But
what size is it, Paul? You know, the vintage hat nerd in me is not going to let you go there without telling me what size it is.
Oh, size. Okay, yes.
In centimeters. Preferably in centimeters.
Well, I'll do my best. Let's have a look and see. In UK size is a 7, which means it's about a 57.
Ooh, I could probably wear that, Paul. If you were interested, we can talk offline. But if you guys are watching this and you want to make, Paul, I'm being presumptuous here. You may not want to sell the hat.
It's up for sale. It's on sale on my website, and I can't even remember how much it was now, but it's up for sale. So, but it's one of those beautiful hats that you just think, I could look at this all day long. I mean, I did actually find, I'm a size 60, so it's very difficult to find a classic homburg or a classic any hat because heads were smaller back in the day. But I did manage to find a Christie's homburg that was of the imperial quality, and I loved that hat. But you know, a gentleman came along, and as you've said with your collection, that when somebody offers the right price, you think, okay, there'll be another one come along. And you know, there's never been another one that come along.
Oh,
so
man,
it's
Paul. But the thing is, that's the beauty of the fact that our collection never stays stagnant. We never know.
Right. Yeah.
It might be somebody on here that watches this, Paul, and says, you know what? I got your hat, Paul. And they know how to reach you because I'm putting your information down on the bottom. If you have Paul's hat and you have a reach out to Paul. He's a hat maker, but he's also a hat nerd, just like all of us. You know, he's not beyond that.
Yeah, I was talking to you recently about Nick Fouquet and his your designer over in California there, and you know what? One of the auction sites here in the UK, a Nick Fouquet straw hat came up this week. I've purchased it, and I will bring it on the show next week when it arrives. But it made my day because I don't believe that the owner must have known the value of the hat because, in my opinion, you know, it was a extremely good price. I mean, I'll have a look at the quality of the hat when it turns up, but I mean, as long as it's in good condition, I should be very pleased with my purchase.
Well, Paul, we'll talk offline about that because I know you're working on a hat for me. Maybe there's a way to do this in a combination together and save on shipping. So if you want this hat more than I do, then maybe you'll get to Paul before I do. But you know, that's okay. I am okay with that. I actually have 4 hats on the way.
Wow.
FYI. You know, so Brian, who was here on Tuesday, I like I said, when I say that I support our hatters, I try to keep to that word. You know, me and Paul are working together. Brian, I'm gonna mention he cut me a friends and family deal for full disclosure. He told me how much he usually sells the hats for. He gave me a very handsome price. So I want to make sure here that nobody, like, if I ever get cut a deal, I'm gonna disclose it here. You know, because I owe it to you guys. You will never see me keep that from you guys. So yeah, I got 2 hats coming from Brian. I also found 2 vintage hats that are a little bit bigger in size. They're like, according to the person I bought it from, because they're being shipped, they should be here tomorrow. They are a size in US size 7 3/4. So obviously, Paul, if that's something that would fit you and they were hats that you would love, I'm not opposed to doing like an exchange with any of my collection, you know. So the thing is, I probably don't have as many hats in your size as you probably have for my size, you know, if that makes any sense.
Well, it's great to be talking the collection size, because it's you know when you sit down and when you are collecting hats, you think, what would I really like? What would my star collection look like? And then when you start, part of the fun is actually looking for them and finding them. And you know, you
Yeah.
might not necessarily buy all of them because the price or the time when it hits you or whatever else. But the fact that you've gone through the chase and you've actually found it and you've done the research on it is you know, I find quite enjoyable. And you know,
Right.
it is what it is in terms of being an unusual hobby, I guess.
Yeah.
But no, it's fun. And when you can find somebody like yourself that's got a collection and people want to swap around and so on, then that's lovely. You know, brilliant
Yeah,
to hear.
it's basically like trading cards, right? We talked about like
Yeah.
I have friends that collect Pokemon cards. So they're like, I don't know what you're doing with that. And obviously I do the same thing. I'm like, I can't imagine myself going gaga over Pokemon cards, but I do respect the process because it's
Yeah.
the collector process is very similar, regardless of whether it's trading cards, hats, cars, watches, stamps, coins, and whatever other else things that you can collect. And again, somebody else may not see what you see, but your fellow nerd, collecting nerd, totally gets it. And it's there's something beautiful about finding your tribe, right? Somebody that understands the allure.
Yeah, and you know, over there, I haven't found many in the UK. Let's put it that way at the moment.
Yeah.
And I think you know, there were one or two, but not enough. So
Yeah.
you know, we're working on that, as we say.
That sounds good. That sounds good. All right. So you know what? I'll get back to this because you know we're approaching the 2-hour mark soon. So it just
Yeah,
shows you how time flies.
I've got to hit the road shortly because of other commitments. But
All
you know,
right.
it's been really nice being here, and love the narrative that you've given around the film.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
you know, there are several other films that we can do this on if you're. I'd certainly
Yeah.
like to listen into what you've got to say.
Yeah.
And you know, I'm quite happy to sit on the sidelines. I'm also quite
Yeah.
happy to sit here and chat through with you, Luke. So and
Yeah.
you
No
know, there's
problem,
no
Paul.
angle for me. I'm just happy to be here.
Hey, thank you, Paul. You already made this a success. Like I said, I know I sound like a broken record, but anytime you come on here, I'm always touched because I know you're a busy man. I respect that. The greatest thing that you can give another person is your time. So it's not lost on me. And again, with no obligation, you can come here as often and as little as you like, and never feel like you're dominating because you are like these interactions are the reason why I created this channel. I know I mentioned that, but for our new viewers, that's the point of this. It's not for me to sit here and you know, be a talking head. You know.
Terrific. Well, look, have a great weekend, and let
You
us
too,
know when you're
Paul.
on next, and I'll tune in. Thank you,
Yeah, we'll
everybody.
talk about that Homburg. I'll go onto your website. And I'll
Yeah,
look at the photos, and maybe we can
do
come
it.
up with something.
We
Awesome.
sure can.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye bye. That was Paul John Murphy of PJ Murphy and Son and Passion for Hats YouTube channel. I got his information scrolling on the bottom. I'll keep that up with you. But it's great. Paul's is the very first hatter that I had on this channel. And you know, again, I feel like we're kind of like brothers from another mother in that respect, in that we vibe really well. We had Brian Forbes here on Tuesday. That was a happy, you know, kind of a happy situation that Paul enhanced when he jumped on here. So I had myself and 2 other hatters on Tuesday for the very first Hat Tuesday #1. So if you haven't seen that and you're watching this, feel free to catch that. If you happen to like the content, then definitely support Paul and his YouTube channel by liking and subscribing his videos. Also support Paul the Hatter. He's a British bespoke hatter. He has a website that I have linked in here. And if you're wanting a fine hat, definitely support him. If he has any inventory that you already like on his website, and he can certainly craft what you might need or want. And same with Brian Forbes. Brian Forbes, aka the eccentric black hatter. He is out in California, and he is probably the most out there and most creative hatter that I have ever come across. You know, I've seen a lot of hatters and their work. You know, I think I can safely speak for Paul and a lot of my fellow hatters that Brian is one of the most unique in that industry. So shout out to Brian. If you watch this, I can't wait to get the hats that you sent me. You know, they should arrive tomorrow, maybe. I don't know. Maybe they won't. Maybe you sent them regular mail. Maybe I'll be a few days. But I do have 2 vintage hats coming tomorrow. They should arrive by tomorrow. And you know, I don't know. We'll see if we end up jumping on. If we create a hat chat, an impromptu hat chat, and I'm able to get Paul or Brian or somebody on there, I'll do that. You know, and I'm definitely going to do that with when I get their hats. So when I get Brian's hats, I'm going to try to bring Brian on so we can talk about it as I'm wearing the hat and reacting in real time. And I also do the same when Paul, when we eventually come up with that design and you're ready to ship that hat, or maybe hats, right? Because we already talked about that black Hamburg. I'm down. But I want to close this out by kind of coming up with like, okay, by the end of The Godfather, this is the look. This is the final form look of Michael Corleone, right? He goes and very quickly drops the black Hamburg, and he comes up with this very, very sharp looking gray Hamburg, right? So Paul kind of thought that the black Hamburg that was for sale is the very same one that I showed earlier. But this gray Hamburg, I don't know what happened. So I have no data to show you who made this Hamburg. Maybe it was a Borsellino, maybe it was a Dobbs, maybe it was a Knox. Who knows? Maybe it was another Kevin McAndrews. I have no idea. If you do, you can share and do that. But I want to talk about the very next major scene, right? So after he meets with Kay, it leads up to the famous meeting with Mo Green. And that's a very pivotal scene in that besides Michael Corleone pulling up to Mo Green's casino in this gray Hamburg, and then wearing it while he's walking up to presumably meet with Mo Green with the Hamburg in his hand, right? He's like, I'm all about business. It's like, why? Why did he choose to go from the black Hamburg to the gray Hamburg? And maybe, just maybe, I'm speculating, is that Michael feels that he's earned the right to wear a less formal looking gray, light color Hamburg. I don't know. Maybe he doesn't need to be sinister. Maybe it's also to maybe disarm Mo Green when he's about to meet Mo Green. All I know is that Michael surprises in that meeting with Mo Green. He surprises Tom Hagen again. He surprises Fredo, his older brother. He's like, man, what's going on with you? Because immediately when he arrives, when Michael arrives at the hotel, Fredo has a party with a bunch of girls. He has Johnny Fontaine there, and they're about to party with these girls. And Michael quickly yells at Fredo and chastises him. Again, this is Michael chastising his older brother and tells him, hey, I'm here for business. Where's Mo Green at? And Fredo's trying to, in essence, protecting Mo Green. He says, gives him an excuse. He says, oh, Mo's going to join us later. You know, he says to call him when you're ready. And Michael says, well, get rid of the girls and then also call Mo. I'm ready to talk business. And then he's like, oh man, that's some serious stuff. Like Michael's dressing down his older brother. So it tells you something about the power dynamic that Michael already has in his favor. And before he even meets with Mo, he goes and talks business with Johnny Fontaine and essentially asserts himself with Johnny Fontaine and says, listen, I want you to sign here for you to agree to do X number of shows for us. And Johnny, like, he wilts right. He basically he wilts to Michael just like he would have wilted to Vito, his dad. So that right there tells you what kind of demeanor that Michael is giving off with his outfit, with his blank stare, and with his speech. He's very to the point, and he tells you exactly what he wants. We do that, and immediately Mo Green comes in, very chummy, trying to be disarming. But Mo Green's a serious character, and Michael does the Vito Corleone in that he doesn't break the gaze with Mo Green throughout the meeting and tells him, hey, I'm here to buy you out. And Mo is kind of like taken aback. Mo is obviously very surprised by the Michael that's in front of him, and then becomes very standoffish, right? He goes from being very chummy to being very standoffish and angry and yelling at essentially some young punk that he really is revealing that he thinks Michael still is. And Michael puts it to bed right away. He's very calm. He breaks out the cigarette, and he's telling him, this is how it's going to be, right? Kind of like a John Travolta in Be Cool. Let me tell you how it's going to be. You either do this or else, right? He doesn't say those words, but he's kind of between the lines with his look. He's telling Mo Green, I'm making you an offer you can't refuse. He even tells Fredo early of his intentions. And Fredo's like, I never said Mo never told me that he was going to sell the casino to you. And then Michael says, like, I'm going to make him an offer he can't refuse. He uses that classic line that his father implemented in the past, up until this point. And he's basically signaling to Tom Hagen, to Johnny Fontaine, and most importantly, to his older brother, Fredo, like, you're not dealing with your kid brother anymore. I'm the boss here. I run things. When Mo Green blows up on him, Michael doesn't go and exchange like voice. Like his voice is he's stern, but he's also tempered. And he's telling Mo Green, like, I already got you beat. I made you react to me. Like, you're already done for, buddy. Right? And Mo Green's kind of doesn't even know what to do with himself, but he storms out. And Fredo goes in and defends Mo Green to his brother. Like, Fredo still doesn't believe Michael at this point. And he says, Michael, you do not talk to a man like Mo Green like that. He tells Michael just like that. And Michael, being very, very businesslike, goes right there and stares. A very famous line. He tells Fredo right then and there in front of everybody in the room. He's like, Fredo, you're my older brother and I love you. But don't ever take sides with anybody against the family again. Ever. And it's very telling, right? That line is very telling about how Michael is. He's like, if you stand in my way, just like Mo Green will stand in my way, I'm gonna do something about it. You're not dealing with your little brother anymore. I'm the boss here. And then Fredo, like, is again shocked, and he appeals to Tom and says, hey, Tom, is there something? Maybe we can talk to the Don. And then Tom puts Fredo in his place and he says, listen, the Don is semi-retired now. If you have any kind of business, you deal with Michael and Michael alone. So Tom's got Michael's back, and it kind of solidifies, hey, Fredo, things are changed. Like, you've been out in Vegas all this time. There's a lot that's happened that you may or may not know about. But this Michael character that's in front of you, your kid brother, is the boss, and he's not to be trifled with. You give him every bit of respect that you would his dad, your dad, Vito, the Don. So it's very powerful dynamics going on here. And right now, the Michael Corleone that wears the gray homburg exists through the rest of the movie. And you kind of know what happens along, right? It's that famous scene where Michael settles all family business, right? As you see the cut scene happening, as right, he attends his father's funeral, right? And that's very business. His dad, before he goes and his dad passes away, before Vito passes away, he mentions and tells his last piece of advice to Michael is, whoever comes at you from our family with an offer to meet up with Barzini, he's the traitor, and you got to deal with him. And Michael Michael's giving his father reverence, but he's also telling his dad, please calm down, Dad. I got it covered. I'm a lot more capable than you think. And Vito knows this, but Vito's a good dad, and he's going to try to go and make sure that his son is not going to falter, right? He has that kind of line. He says, we're men, and men can't afford to be careless. Women and children can afford to be careless, but not men. And Michael's kind of like, he's there, he's nodding in agreement, but he's also appreciative that his dad, even in his weakened state, is backing him. Ultimately, the Don passes away, and he passes away wearing a very raggedy hat, right? It's not the hat, or at least it's not the hat in the same condition. And it goes to show you that this is the man in decline. He no longer needs to wear the fine homburg or the fine fedora that we saw earlier and we talked about earlier. He's wearing kind of a more lackadaisical, I don't even know if it's a straw hat, but it might be a felt hat, but it's very raggedy. And then he passes away. Then we cut into like the funeral where Tessio reveals himself as the traitor because he's the one that approaches Michael, and with the idea that they're going to meet with Barzini. So Michael now knows that besides Barzini, it's Tessio that betrayed him in the family. And Hagen even tells him, "Hey, I would have thought it was Clemenza. It would have been Clemenza." And then he said, "No, Tessio was the real threat all along." So Michael kind of says, "Say, hey, this is nothing new for me. I knew Tessio was it all along. I just needed that confirmation. I needed to see him right in the face and try to betray me, just like my dad warned me about." So Michael's kind of like, you could see the ultimate chess master here. All along, he still has his Homburg in tow, his gray Homburg. And then cuts to kind of like that famous scene where he's baptizing his sisters and Carlo's son at the church. But at the same time, as that's happening, he's taking like all these characters that have betrayed him are getting dealt with. Right. So you got Barzini is shot and killed. Tattaglia, I believe, is killed. Right. I think Tattaglia is killed by Clemenza himself. Frankie Chico, I believe his name is, kills Barzini. Oh no, sorry, it wasn't Frankie Chico. It was the other hitman, the police officer that ultimately plays a greater role, Al Neri, that kills Barzini. So you can see all these murders happening, and then some unknown character kills Mo Green, shoots him right through the eye in Vegas, and he deals with Mo Green. And that obviously that moment right there plays a really pivotal role in part 2, which we'll discuss in another episode. So yeah, and then ultimately Michael gets out of that baptism, and then he deals with his final piece of business. Right, his final piece of business is dealing with Carlo, his brother-in-law. Right, Carlo is married to his sister Connie, and he just baptized their baby boy. Or girl, I think it's his baby boy. And then you had that famous scene where Michael is talking to Carlo, and Carlo doesn't even know. He doesn't even know it yet. But Michael is kind of setting him up to admit that he was instrumental in having his older brother Sonny killed, and that Michael was revealing that he knew it all along, and that it's like you think that ruse was too clever to fool a Corleone. He's like, come on now, just admit it. And Carlo's still denying it. But Michael already knows, even though he already knows, he has to go and get Carlo to actually verbally admit that he betrayed Michael, he betrayed Sonny, he betrayed the family, and set up Sonny to get killed. And it was Barzini that pulled the string all along. Michael just wanted it for closure. So at that point, Carlo's already nervous. He kind of already knows. He's having that trembling feeling, just the same way he would have trembled if Vito was there in front of him, and confronting him. And then Michael, trying to disarm him, offers him a drink, and then tells him, he's like, "Hey, you think I'm gonna kill my sister's husband? My nephew's my nephew's father? I'm going to banish you from the family. Here's a plane ticket. You're no longer, I don't want to see your face again." And then Carlo, kind of thinking, like still nervous, walks his way out, but he's kind of nervous. He's like, he still doesn't know what's happening, because he knows what Michael's up to, but he still gets into the car, and then you see what happens. Carlo is ultimately killed, presumably by Clemenza. He's strangled. It's a very big, powerful scene. And that was the last piece of business, right? The last piece of business that Michael needed to take care of to ensure that his family was okay. And then obviously there's the final scene, where Kay and him have a conversation. And he goes, and Connie is hysterical. She shows up at the compound at the Corleone mansion, saying, "You killed him. you know, you killed my husband. And Connie tells Kay, your husband's a murderer, right? It's not like my brother. She says, your husband, right? It's like that attribution theory. My brother wouldn't do that. Your husband did that. The guy you married, right? And then Kay is like taken aback. She's kind of like, holy cow, what the heck is going on here? She confronts Michael, and Michael tells her, hey, don't you ever ask me about my business. And then you can see the balls down Kay, right? So for lack of a better term, not to be crass, Kay shows how strong a character she is, that she's willing to confront this scary Michael here, this powerful Michael. And she says, tell me the truth. And Michael, as strong and as powerful as he is, he relents to Kay. He says, okay, Kay, just for once, just for this once, I'll tell you my business. I'll let you ask me anything you want. And then she goes and she tells him without hesitation, did you murder Carlo? And Michael basically looks her dead in the eye and says, no, I didn't. Lies right to her face. And it tells you what lengths that Michael is willing to go to make sure that, one, the family is kept intact and is also kept sacred, but also what kind of lengths, you know, he's willing to do in spite of that. In spite of the fact that he cares about family, he cares more about dealing with betrayal, even if he has to deal with family. That already sets up what's going to happen in part 2. But the closing scene is kind of like a befuddled Kay watching this man that she basically, this different man, this powerful man that she doesn't even know she recognizes anymore. She can't even believe that she confronted him the way she did. So she already learned something about herself. The viewer knows something about Kay. They also learn another piece of information about Michael and the man that he is, or the man that he's become at the end of this movie. And the closing scene are the two doors closing as I believe Clemenza and all the other folks, you know, so the right hand men of Michael kiss his hand and kind of cement that he is the Don now. He is the Godfather, which sets up everything in part 2. Again, I happen to be a greater fan of part 2 than I am even of 1. There's a lot of reasons for that, and I'll go into that when we get to Godfather part 2. But you know what? We've already gone over 2 hours on this. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. This is a classic movie for hat nerds and non-hat nerds alike, right? So if you haven't seen this movie lately, maybe you watch this episode and then rewatch, like Paul said he was going to do. See if there's anything that I might have screwed up, or maybe something that you can enhance in a follow-up discussion. I have no problem, no matter what I'm talking about, I have no problem talking about The Godfather in any of the incarnations, you know, no matter what. So I hope you guys enjoyed this. Well, I'm going to go and I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And wow, I can't believe I did over 2 hours, except I can't believe it. You know, the hat of the day, this is my gray Dobbs Homburg that I profiled in a previous episode. This hat is from 1957. I have the receipt to prove it. It was, I believe, from September 1957. It was bought from a hat shop in Sacramento, California. I just happened to be lucky enough to buy it from somebody that had the original receipt, and I kept it. And that's one of the many reasons why this hat is precious to me. But now you know the other reason is because, you know, just like this gray Homburg, Michael Corleone, who's hanging up on my wall right now, and will be hanging up again in a different incarnation, as I mentioned to Paul. I have a photo, a very large photo of Michael Corleone hanging up here, of Michael Corleone in Sicily. He's at the bar or establishment where he meets up with, Apollonia's father, and then kind of is another pivotal moment in his maturity that tells you about his character. So I have that photo, but he has a flat cap, as you kind of seen earlier, and my motif is pretty much fedoras. Fedoras in general, felt hats, presumably fedoras, Homburgs, bowlers, and pork pies. So I'm going to surround myself. So I'm going to take down that photo once, kind of tell you more about my hat journey and where I'm at in my headspace right now. I'm gonna take down that photo. I'll either I already put it for sale. So if you're interested in that, and I don't know how I can get it to you if you're not in the DC metro area, but maybe there's a way, and I'm not opposed to it. But I'm trying to try to sell it locally. And if it doesn't sell, I'll just keep it and maybe put it somewhere else. But in my office, I'm gonna hang. So I'm gonna have the 3 photos to at least to start. It'll be my Rocky 2 photo of Sylvester Stallone in Rocky 2 with his tilted fedora. He's on the left here because Rocky's a southpaw, and I'll get to Rocky at some point. I also have to the right. It's gonna be the Rat Pack in as the famous pool scene with Dino, Old Blue Eyes, and Sammy Davis Jr. in the movie Robin and the Seven Hoods. I believe also from the 1950s. Great hat movie. Maybe I'll profile it in a future episode, on future Fedora Friday episode. But in front is going to be Michael Corleone in his homburg, and I believe this is gray homburg. They're all black and white photos. I can't wait for it to arrive. I think it'll arrive by tomorrow or sometime this weekend. But at some point, I'll start sharing photos of my office, and I'm going to build a hat wall. I'm already in line to build my hat wall. The only thing, like I shared before, is I'm going to have my hats hanging at the 6-foot mark. So given my desk at its lower level, you might not see any of my hats when I start hanging them up. But maybe what I'll do is if somebody really wants to, I'll raise my desk up, and then maybe you'll get a shot of my hats. I don't know. I'll figure something out. Or maybe I won't do that at all, and I'll just take photos or a video and I'll post it in my post. So yeah, that has been Fedora Friday #1 with the great classic, iconic movie, The Godfather, made in 1972, written and directed by Mario Puzo and Francis Ford Coppola. And if you haven't watched that series, I forget what the name of that series is called, but it's a series that came out recently that profiled what went on during the making of The Godfather. I highly recommend it. Not as great number of hats in there, but gives you a lot of the insider info that I talked about on this show. So you should be able to download it. I don't know if it's Netflix or Amazon Prime or Hulu. I don't know. One of those streaming platforms, you should be able to find it. But yeah, that has been Fedora Friday #1 with The Godfather. And I hope you enjoyed it. I want to thank Paul for joining us. I want to thank Morgan for joining us as well as a participant. Morgan, it's great to have you back. You can come and go as you please, just like Paul does. It's no problem. I'm just tickled that you thought to join me. So that has been Fedora Friday #1. There will be a future Fedora Friday. I'll put out a new poll for you guys to vote in. Maybe I'll carry over the 3 choices that didn't get selected. So that was The Untouchables, 1987 film with Robert De Niro. That was also King of New York from 1990 with Christopher Walken, Lawrence Fishburne, Wesley Snipes, and David Caruso. And as well as Road to Perdition, which had Tom Hanks, Paul Newman, Daniel Craig, and Jude Law. Lots of great hats between all those 3. And then I'll add another one. Maybe, who knows? Maybe I should add Godfather Part 2. I'm not opposed to it. I got no problem doing Fedora Friday #2 with Godfather Part 2. But I'll let you guys determine it, right? It'll be you guys voting for it. So if you haven't already done so, like and subscribe to my channel, and try to get me up to 50 followers at least. I'm at 41, I believe, right now. And if you don't want to do it, that's okay. I'm just trying to build this channel up as best as possible. So if you can support me and all of my affiliate folks, my board of directors, Paul and Passion for Hats, and PJ Murphy and Son, Brian, the eccentric black hatter, over at Brian Forbes Hats, I would really appreciate it. It really does. It really helps motivate us to keep going in our respective hat journeys. I think I can safely speak for them when I say that it gives us all energy. But if you don't happen to want to do that, then maybe, just maybe, you could do me one other small favor. I'm a little bit less negotiable on this, Hopefully I can make you an offer you can't refuse when I ask, or I demand, or plead for you to stay adding, my friend. Have a great rest of your Friday. Have a great weekend. Ciao.